Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. Rabbi Chaim Richman here in Jerusalem, Israel, together with Yitzchak Reuven. Today, the second day of the month of Menachem the Consoling Father, 5777. It's July 25th, 2017. This week, the first Torah portion of the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, Parshat Devarim, and we are now in what is called the 9 days that lead up to the month, to the solemn fast day of Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, time of a deepening of our connection to the Holy Temple, a time of an emphasis on the anguish and the suffering of not having the Holy Temple in our lives, a time of an intensification of practices of mourning, customs of mourning, all designed towards our focus on the fact that we can't go on as a people, as human beings, as a world, without the Holy Temple. And to tell you the truth, boy, are we feeling that this year as Av enters. You know, there's a statement that our sages make in the Code of Jewish Law. As Av, as the month of Av enters, we lessen in joy. And that's exactly what's been happening in many ways during these days of the between the straits. It's called Bein HaMitzarim, the way that this period of time between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av is described in Jewish tradition. You know, last week it was Friday night. It was Sabbath Eve when 3 members of a beautiful family were savagely killed as they sat down to their Shabbat dinner and a special celebration of the birth of a grandchild in the Sumerian community of Chalamish, referred to also as Neve Suf. Arab terrorist knocked at the door and absolutely butchered them in the most horrific way. And he did that, he said, on social media beforehand, because he felt that he couldn't go on anymore with the desecration of Al-Aqsa. What are we talking about here? I don't even know where to start. I'm so totally rankled. I'm so totally beside myself, and I'm so totally just, I'm a wreck. I'm an absolute wreck over what's going on here. So here's how it goes. It was 10 days ago, Friday, last week before last, 2 Fridays ago, that a Muslim terrorist, 3 Muslim terrorists who had hidden weapons on the Temple Mount, where we still don't know, came out of their holy prayers on Friday with their Carl Gustav style machine guns and looked for somebody to kill, and came out of the Lion's Gate and murdered 2 Israeli police officers. They didn't happen to be Jewish, those police officers. They were Druzi, loyal to the state of Israel. And then they ran back onto the Temple Mount, where subsequently there was a firefight and they were killed. This incident, which basically to the eyes of the whole world showed what we've been saying all along, which is that the Temple Mount is a killing field in the eyes of the Muslims, that it is their sacred ground is for them a city of refuge where they can go in and out as they please and commit acts of murder, where they can stockpile weapons, and shows exactly just how holy they think it is. Well, this caused Israel to get strict and say, listen, we can't have this. And so Israel tightened up the security measures on the Temple Mount, and they installed sophisticated metal detectors which have the ability to to discern different types of metal, sophisticated metal detectors at the gates of the Temple Mount, which the Muslim worshippers would have to pass through, just like the Jews and Christians and all others who pass through the one gate that non-Muslims are allowed to use, according to the Muslims. I've always had to pass through these metal detectors, just like we have to pass through to the Western Wall and to any shopping center. And by the way, just like millions and millions of Muslim pilgrims and worshippers have to pass through in order to enter the Grand Mosque in Mecca. So Israel set up these security devices at the gates for the Muslims to pass through, and some sophisticated cameras on the Temple Mount, also saying, oh, this can't be tolerated, this is never going to happen again. So the Muslim Waqf, which is a Jordanian body, protested and said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to allow you to check us. We're not going to submit to your sovereignty, and we're not going to pass through these metal detectors. The head honcho, the Muslim mufti, made a statement that anybody who passes through those metal detectors, I swear by Allah, that his prayer will not be heard in heaven. So the world and we saw ridiculous pictures of hundreds or thousands of Muslims standing outside the Temple Mount, bowing down in the parking lots because they refused to go in. And this upset the world very, very much. The UN said it had to be resolved. Jordan, of course, was just absolutely indignant. And a situation was created which was very unusual. For the first time since 1969, there were no Muslims on the Temple Mount. I went yesterday, and it was just the most lovely experience. It was sweet, it was pleasant, it was... Yes, the police were still zealously guarding over the Jews and not allowing them to pray, but even their attitude towards the Jewish worshippers was friendly, relaxed. They were not about to turn a blind eye and let people bow down because of the holy status quo, after all. But it was an unusual experience. It was an amazing experience, and it led many in the Temple Mount movements to think that this could be the beginning of a whole new era. Maybe the Messiah is about to knock on the door. Maybe it's time to entreat the government to build a synagogue on the Temple Mount. Everything has changed. Wow. It's a beautiful morning, and all that kind of thing. The Rascals, 1969, I think, maybe 7, and everybody thought it was like, wow, this is the moment that we've been living for, because there's no Muslims on the Temple Mount. We took a picture, put it on Facebook. Not a man, not one Muslim on the Temple Mount. Jews, 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 streaming in incredible numbers during the 10 days that the Temple Mount was being boycotted by the Muslims, which shows you how holy they think it is. But then that led to a very strange kind of dynamic, which is that basically Israel felt terrible about this. Israel meaning the government. Something's got to give here. Something's got to give. We can't have them boycotting the Temple Mount. We want them to come back. But I mean, after all, we don't want them to murder us. Of course, they're not agreeing not to murder us. They're not agreeing to be checked like any human being should be checked. But, oh gosh, what a terrible standoff it created for Israel. I'm saying, of course, very, very sarcastically, because this was an incredible opportunity for Netanyahu, if not to build the Holy Temple, I'm being realistic, and if not to build a synagogue, I'm being realistic, and if not to allow Jewish prayer, but at least to make a strong statement of sovereignty, that this really is ours. Because, you know, we've been discussing ever since you can remember, ever since we were born, we've been discussing in 600 episodes of Temple Mount, this entirely nebulous affair of who really is master over the Temple Mount is what lays at the heart of the dilemma that Israel faces every day, and of course who we are as a people. So what happened was Israel's relationship with Jordan reached a tremendous crisis. Abbas, the head of the so-called Palestinian Authority, that terrorist entity which is attempting to steal all of our land from us, he announced that he's not having security cooperation with Israel anymore. The whole Arab world is in a total uproar. Demonstrations everywhere.
Not really. I take exception to that. I think most of the Muslim world, Arab Muslim world, other than giving lip service, and yes, there are some cities where there are some protests, they weren't particularly interested. I think it was a big bluff. As usual, the bark is much stronger than the bite, and it was really the Western world that was in a big uproar about it.
And what exactly was the Western world upset about? The fact that Israel was insisting on the most basic security measures that any civilized country, that every American expects to be protected. We're talking about the holiest place in the world. We're talking about the center of Jerusalem. And we're talking about the fact that a murderous act was committed from there by savages who took advantage of the fact that everyone thinks it's so holy to them and hid their weapons there, came out like little rodents, sprayed their machine gun fire, and ran back again. So anyway, so the world is very, very upset. And so Netanyahu, in a strong show of sovereignty, he demanded that these metal detectors be set up there. And I said, well, I don't think that's how you show sovereignty. You show sovereignty by allowing your people to pray. You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth at once, because that's very confusing. You can't say, we're sovereign, and you have to pass through our metal detectors, and at the same time say, but I won't allow my people to pray because I don't want them to offend you. Anyway, make a long story short, as far as what you're saying, Yitzchak, that the Arab world wasn't upset. One Arab was very upset, and that was a Jordanian carpenter who had some sort of a job in the Israeli embassy in Amman, and he attacked a member of the embassy staff with a screwdriver, stabbed him, and he was killed, along with another Jordanian, apparently. This plunged Israel's relations with Jordan even into a deeper level of crisis, and Jordan demanded that this man be prosecuted. They held him. They would not allow him to return to Israel, even though, according to the Geneva Convention, that man has absolute diplomatic immunity, because it's as if it took place in Israel itself. But you know what? All the international laws, I'm learning and I'm being reminded, they all apply to every person in the world except a Jew. So the parents of the murderer, the parents of the attacker who wanted to murder an Israeli in the embassy in Jordan, they called for the death penalty for the Israeli who killed his attacker, okay? And we wake up this morning, not that we slept very much, and we find out that overnight the cabinet decided to remove the security measures. The cabinet decided that the metal detectors will be removed. I think this is a deal that was brokered maybe by America. They're going to be substituted for some other sort of sophisticated measures. The cabinet decided to remove the metal detectors and the cameras. I don't know, as of this moment, as of this recording, whether or not the Muslims are returning to the Temple Mount in droves. And the reason I don't know, it could be the Waqf, the Jordanian Waqf is still boycotting. And the reason is because the Jordanian Waqf announced that this too is not sufficient. And what I just read is that not only is Israel removing these new metal detectors and the new security cameras that were installed, but they're even removing, get this, are you listening to me? I can hardly say this. They're removing the old security cameras, which had already been agreed upon previously by the Waqf. Even those are being removed. And all this apparently as the price that Netanyahu was forced to pay in order to bring back the Israeli who was basically being held for ransom by Jordan. This is the saga thus far. I don't think I've left out too much. The fact is, it's extremely, extremely apropos for these days of somber mourning over the Holy Temple. It is, in my opinion, one long sustained nightmare. And I think that this whole thing that's going on here is so integrally, irrevocably woven up with the horrible butchery, murder of members of the Solomon family, the grandfather and his daughter and grandchild.
His grandfather and his son-in-law
and daughter that were murdered on Friday night, who basically were murdered by an Arab terrorist who was upset about Al-Aqsa. We go and we say, this has got to stop. This is a red line. Like Erdogan said, the Minister of Internal Security, he said, this is a red line. This can't go on. So we set up all this stuff. And the world basically, I don't know what they do to us. I don't know what they do to Netanyahu. I don't know what the secret is here of what we owe anybody. Says take them down, and we take them down. So there's your sovereignty right there. And so what have we gained? What have we gained in the past 10 days by the fact that we finally had a window of opportunity when the Muslims were not to be found on the Temple Mount, were not going on the Temple Mount, showed basically what they think of it. Because if they're so holy to them, why weren't they going? But you know what? They flexed their muscle, and the world paid attention, and they said, no, we won't tolerate any Israeli sovereignty. We don't mind walking through Magnetometers on our way into the Grand Mosque in Mecca, and we don't mind walking through them in every airport in the world, and we don't even mind walking through them at the entrance to the National Insurance Institute here in Israel, where they line up every month to get their welfare checks that we pay for. They don't mind that either. That's not an insult. That's not an insult. They're willing to recognize Israeli sovereignty, just not on the Temple Mount. And we, unfortunately, apparently agree. So what I have to say to you today is that, in my opinion, Israel removing those metal detectors from the Temple Mount and leaving the ones by the Western Wall and leaving the ones that we have to go through at the Mughrabi, a.k.a. Hallel Gate, I think this is not only embarrassing, ridiculous, and shameful. I think it's criminally irresponsible, and I don't even know how to lift my head up. I think this is basically a total indictment on the bankruptcy of Netanyahu and his inability to shine forth true leadership. That's what I have to say at the moment. But like I said, and Yitzchak and I, we couldn't get to go together yesterday, so I went with some other people in the morning. Wow, what a time it was. I was able to pray pretty much, you know. I mean, it was a totally different thing because the police, they weren't like looking to get us. They understood what we wanted to do, and they didn't let us pray like ostensibly, like, you know, like from our lips, like really demonstratively. But you know what? It was a different atmosphere. And yeah, so I got to see that and be there. Yitzchak is going to go today. He'll let us know what's going on there now. And by the way, 1 week from today is Tisha B'Av. And as in other years, when Tisha B'Av has fallen out on a Tuesday, you know, the laws of Tisha B'Av, it's a very, very difficult fast day, but it's not like the Sabbath, and we do use all of the technology, etc., that we would on a weekday. Yitzchak and I are going to go to the Temple Mount, God willing, very early in the morning on Tisha B'Av. We hope to be joined there by thousands and thousands of Jews. Then we're going to come straight back to the studio, and in our state of fasting and mourning for the temple, we are going to come to you on Tisha B'Av itself. So Temple Talk will be broadcast next week at this time on the 9th of Av.
And as a footnote to next week's planned ascent to the Temple Mount, many past years, the same Muslims who were so indignant about having to pass through these metal detectors, etc., have caused all sorts of violent disruptions and things leading up to the 9th, so that the police would respond by closing it to the Jews. So we'll see what they have. They're not finished. You know, they flexed their muscle, and they got the attention they wanted. I'm sure they'll be very full of themselves right now. And on the other hand, even though Netanyahu capitulated in a very shameful way, I do think that our current internal security minister, who is responsible for the police, will do everything in his power to keep it open.
Yes, but what is he opposite Netanyahu? Netanyahu is the one who decides everything about the Temple Mount, and frankly, I'm afraid, I don't want to say, but I'm afraid that the Waqf will be treating the Jews worse than they ever did before, because now they see exactly what power they have. And again, I think that this is...
I'm agreeing with you, which is why I'm saying that we'll see what happens next week, what trouble will start to foment.
I think this is a catastrophe of national importance. Again, if I was to simplify everything in a very simple timeline, a very simple equation, here's what the equation looks like on the chalkboard. 3 murderous animal Arab terrorists murder 2 policemen. Israel says, this has got to stop, this is never going to happen again. We're going to tighten up our grip on the Temple Mount. The Muslims explode, go and butcher a family. stand outside and fold their arms and protest, and Israel says, okay, sorry. So you know what? This week's Torah portion is the first Torah portion in Deuteronomy, Devarim. And one thing that's very special about it, you know that Devarim is different than the other 4 books of the Torah because it was all spoken by Moshe during the 5 weeks right before his death. And the beginning of the Parsha of Devarim begins with some very gentle rebuke, that Moshe rebuked the people, and everybody knows, Rashi tells us in those first few verses that Moshe was alluding to different sins that the generation of the desert committed, but he didn't want to embarrass them, because a true leader is so compassionate for his people. He knows he has to chastise them, but he doesn't want to embarrass them, so he alludes to the sin of the golden calf and the spies, but he didn't say it in so many words. A number of years ago, I recorded a Torah portion video about this, and I paraphrased this, and I said that today, if Moshe was speaking and he wanted to chastise his people and allude to things that they did, hapless foibles and sins that they did, he would have to mention Oslo. He would have to begin with the Madrid conference. He would have to mention Oslo. He would have to mention why. And he would have to mention, of course, Gush Katif and every terrible thing that's happened since then. But now I have to say that I think this is so apropos that this happened now and that we're reading this Torah portion. Please study the first verse on Rashi. Because I think that actually now the greatest embarrassment that we need to be chastised for is what's happened this week. Our single-handed, bold demonstration to the whole world that we are truly not sovereign on the Temple Mount. What perfect timing in these days leading up to the destruction of the Holy Temple. What perfect timing for the book of Devarim and Parshat Devarim, where Moshe has to chastise the people and gently remind them of what they've done. Well, somehow we have to work into those first few verses some sort of allusion to the decision to remove the metal detectors from the Temple Mount. And you know what? It can only get better. And we know that the month of Av is called Menachem Av. It's the consoling Father. And we know that from all of this will sprout forth the redemption. That's what Tu B'Av is all about. And we know that the indefatigable spirit of the people of Israel will not tolerate these shenanigans. And so the best is yet to come, as usual. And God willing, we will see the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. And there's the music. So stay with us. We'll be right back on Temple. Actually, no, there isn't any music now. This is when the music would be coming in. Forgot to mention to you, we are not playing music, as is our tradition every year, because that's one of the aspects of our mourning during these 9 days. So this is a musicless Temple Talk. But stay with us. We'll be right back.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven, and with me in the studio, Rabbi Chaim Richman here in Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the second day of the month of Av, otherwise known as Menachem Av, the Consoling Father, 5777. It's the 25th of July, 2017. This coming Shabbat, we open up a new book, the fifth and final of the 5 books of the Torah, the book of Deuteronomy, known in Hebrew as Devarim. The book is, of course, as the Rabbi explained earlier, entirely composed of the words of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our master, that he delivered during the final 5 weeks of his life to the children of Israel, the new generation, the generation that would be entrant into the land. And of course, the Rabbi mentioned that he castigates gently, but nevertheless, and sometimes a little less gently.
Chastises.
Sometimes a little less gently as the book proceeds. And sometimes he's talking about the generation that already passed. Sometimes he's talking about the generation that is right before him that's about to go into the land. Before we proceed any further, I'm going to get back to that point in a minute, Rabbi. Just once again mention that no music in our show today in the introduction or outroduction, because during the 9 days of Av, which is a time of intensified reflection, introspection, and taking on the attributes of mourning for the loss of the Holy Temple, we don't listen to music. taking on the attributions of mourning for our inaction and national inability up to this point to do something about the vacancy left on the Temple Mount, which cries out for the Holy Temple. But, Rabbi, I started to talk about 2 generations. There's a generation of the desert, wonderful generation, as you always put it so eloquently. They ate manna. They ate from the table of heaven. It doesn't get better than that, yet they couldn't make the switch. They didn't have it in them to get into the land of Israel when push came to shove, when the spotlight was on them, they caved.
They wanted to eat it forever, and they thought that was as high as it gets. And they didn't realize the food of Eretz Israel is even higher than the manna.
But I think that there are the generation, and I use that a little more, less literally, a little more figuratively, the generation of those who established the state of Israel. They love what they established. They love the state of Israel. They love it as it is. They also don't have the ability to push one step further. And I think that Netanyahu is part of that generation. He doesn't have it in his mental wheelhouse.
What a brilliant metaphor, Yitzchak. I know you're smart, but... So you're saying the generation of the founding fathers of the state, they're like the generation of the desert.
Right. And we've been making videos about this, Rabbi.
Right.
We've been making videos for the past 5 years. During the 9 days, we've been presenting these videos about
a younger
generation that doesn't have those mental, spiritual blocks and blinders on their eyes.
You know what? The young generation, like the kids that we meet up on the Temple Mount, they are ready to rebuild, and they're the ones that are settling the land. They're the ones that are standing as a human bulwark against the disintegration of our land in the hands of those that savagely butcher us. And they're the ones that are actually ready to rise up now and rebuild without apologizing.
And they're the ones, when they finally take the positions of power in the state of Israel, I think will be the ones who will move forward and forge ahead in re-establishing once and for all our sovereignty in the Temple Mount and moving forward from there.
They already are taking positions of power in the IDF slowly.
Yeah. We just, this past Friday, released our most recent video called Time to Wake Up.
Time to Wake Up.
And make the dream a reality.
Make the dream come true.
Make the dream come true.
It's the 5th in our series, really. It's not called The Children Are Ready, like the first 3, because last year's was also not called Children Are Ready. It was called Time to Rebuild. But this video, which is only about 2 minutes, I think it's coming up to about 10,000 views now, and just released it just Friday. It is an exploration of what could be and what the younger generation wants to see, really, because I don't want to give away anything to anybody who hasn't seen it yet.
Also, it describes the limitations and the tunnel vision of the older generation.
Exactly.
So I think it perfectly describes what we've been talking about this entire show so far, which is the inability of one generation to move forward and the readiness of the next generation to take the steps necessary.
And when we create these videos, which is something that we really, really are dedicated to. It's in fact this some people call it the summertime video of the Temple Institute, and people say that they look forward to it every year. It's probably one of the most important things that we do, because our goal here is multi-pronged at the Temple Institute. We want to do as much as possible to rebuild the temple. We want to prepare for that. We want to educate. We want to facilitate and be at the head of the revolution, the spiritual revolution. And one of the main things that has to happen is that people have to begin to learn to think differently and to see things differently and to open up their minds to a different possibility. You know, I believe that every year what's going on now is that the Jewish people are prisoner to the cycle of time. They're like handcuffed to the cycle of time instead of being liberated by it and released by it, as is the desire of the Torah, as was Hashem's plan, that we're supposed to plug into the sacred seasons and they're supposed to lift us up. That's how the sacred seasons of the calendar, the Hebrew calendar, are designed. But as a result of the trauma to the head that Israel received throughout the exile, we've come home and we've basically brought the exile mentality with us, and so now we're prisoner to the cycle and expecting to mourn, expecting to do this forever. And that's why Jews will say to each other on their way to the synagogue on the eve of the 9th of Av, and it just burns me up. And they say to each other, it seems, I don't know, sarcastic to me, and I know they mean it very innocently. They say to each other, God willing, and this is like an hour or half an hour before the fast begins. So the fast has already begun and they're already walking to the synagogue. They say, God willing, we won't be fasting this year. I'm like, what are you talking about? How do you expect it to change? You're really expecting it to fall from heaven right now? How do you expect it to change if you're not willing to change it, if you don't do something to change it? Why do the sages state that everyone who's not involved with the restoration of the temple is reckoned by heaven as if they destroyed it, or as if they live in the generation that destroyed it? Because we are responsible for doing something about it. So basically the goal of these films is to jar people in a very loving way, like the chastising of Moshe, even more loving, I think. Not that we have something up on Moshe, but it's to jar people into thinking, wow, it doesn't have to be like this forever. It doesn't have to be like this forever at all. And I got to tell you, this one, Time to Wake Up, it is, I think, the most powerful, beautiful, successful film that we've ever made, just from an artistic point of view, from a professional choreography, filmmaking point of view. I really, really love it. It means a lot to me. I know it does to you too, Yitzchak. I think it was originally your idea, basically.
Yeah, it's a 2-minute video, so everybody, I don't care, you can start watching it now while I'm talking. It's more important than what I'm saying to watch the video. And what's equally as important, maybe more important, once you've watched it, share it with somebody else, because the message is so simple and so subtle, even if the person who watches it doesn't quite put it all together, right away. It sort of injects something into them, I think, which begins the process of starting to see things and understands things a little differently, like the rabbi was saying.
And while you're at it, watch the old ones too.
Watch
our old stuff. It's all good.
And really share it, because here's a case where the larger numbers really will matter, really will mean something, because it means that this message of hope and of vision and of taking on responsibility for ourselves will get spread and
there's no way that it would be misunderstood. We've gotten tremendously positive feedback, I think now, and from the Jewish community, and there's no way that it's going to be misunderstood, because it's quite clear what we're trying to say. And some people are reacting in the most positive, emotive way, and some people, maybe a few people, are also defensive and feeling, what are you trying to say exactly here? Which reminds me of the fact that I was supposed to speak here in Israel in a certain city this week on Thursday night. I was going to give a class about the Temple Mount and going up to the Temple Mount and how important it is. I gave one like that in a different community last Shabbat. I was supposed to speak Thursday night, and the rabbi apparently canceled it. He apparently doesn't want me to speak in his synagogue. I get it. It's like a couple of days before Tisha B'Av. We're all focused on the Holy Temple and the Temple Mount and how important it is and how we can't live without it. That's why we're going to be. That's why we're not bathing for pleasure. We're not shaving. We're not engaged in anything joyous. We're going to be sitting on the floor in Tisha B'Av for 26 hours. We're not going to be eating. It's so important to us. But no, don't come to my synagogue to speak about it, because, I can't deal with that. I don't have the vessels to deal with that direct statement that we should be doing something about it. And that makes me pretty upset. But you know what? I'm about as surprised as this rabbi canceling my appearance as I was surprised to find out this morning that Israel removed the metal detectors. Neither of them surprised me, but both of them infuriate me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a description.
I forgot to mention something else also. I forgot to mention that yesterday, which was Rosh Chodesh, first day of the month of Av, and it was my great honor to be on the Temple Mount and to pray there for everybody. You know who you are, all those people who asked me to pray, and to be there. I forgot to mention that was the day of the passing, the anniversary of the death of the high priest Aaron. Aharon HaKohen, his yahrzeit, the anniversary of his death, is the first day of Av. And of course, he is the very paradigm, the very embodiment of one who seeks peace, one who radiates love for everyone. That was the midah, the characteristic of Aaron. He was known as the great peacemaker. And so what do we read? Back to my being totally infuriated, back to my having so much bile rising and my tearing my few remaining hairs out. And of course, well, I'll skip the other things. Anyway, what do I read? I read that yesterday Jordan threatened arrest for Jews that were in Jordan visiting at Aaron's grave, because Aaron's gravesite, Aaron's tomb, is on a mountaintop in Jordan, and it is a place of pilgrimage for Jews, because after all, 1993 was the year we have a peace accord with Jordan, but Jordan threatened arrest of the Jews that were there if they would pray. So, whoa, wait a minute. You know that's what the Jordanian...
Well, you didn't catch the world indignation? You didn't catch the UN's condemnation of Jordan's decree that Jews can't pray?
Jordan's proxy in my own city, in my home of Jerusalem, is the Jordanian Waqf. And they, in collusion with the police, with the Israel police, I've learned to really respect the police much more than I ever did over this past week. So let me just put the blame squarely on the desk of Netanyahu, who instructs the police. They make sure that Jews won't pray on the Temple Mount. But now you're saying that Jordan doesn't want to see a Jew praying anywhere, because they also threatened arrest of Jews who were praying at Aaron's tomb. And like Yitzchak just said, gosh, I didn't read about that in CNN. The fact that Jewish human civil... Oh, wait. Are Jewish humans? Do they have civil rights? That's a different question, but they're being trampled. And they were threatened yesterday with arrest. Of course, you can say that was part of the tremendously escalated...
Actually, Rabbi, no,
relationship between Jordan and Israel.
It's reported from time to time that Israeli Jews, I don't know about Jews coming from America, but Israeli Jews, when they go over the bridge to enter Jordan, they are often told to put their stuff away, keep it away.
They can't have tefillin with them and everything like that.
It's not a new thing. It just was even more ironic than usual yesterday.
Well, yesterday was a very bad day for Israeli-Jordanian relations because of that embassy attack.
Because of the Jordanian who wanted to murder an Israeli.
No, not because of that. Because the Israeli had the audacity to shoot to kill his attacker. Perfectly understandable that the attacker's parents demanded the death penalty from that Israeli
they said, first of all, our son's innocent, but if he did intend to kill him, he's a martyr.
Wait, no, that's not what they said. They said, first of all, our son died for Allah. Second of all, the Israeli deserves the death penalty. So you see, they have their cake, they eat it, and we, Ana Aniba, the Geneva Convention and every other understanding of rights never applies to the Jewish people. So
we don't apply it to ourselves. That's the bottom line. And when the spies came back and they said we are as grasshoppers in their eyes, they were of course reflecting their own lack of self-esteem, not because I don't know how they appeared to the inhabitants of the land. They just said we were as grasshoppers in their eyes, and that's what Netanyahu basically said yesterday when he took down the security arrangements. He said we're as grasshoppers in their eyes. We as grasshoppers can only jump so high, and we have to know our place. And
oh man, I gotta tell you, we have lived through so much, Yitzchak. We have been here for so many years. You and I'm here 35 years. How long are you here? 30.
I'm here also since 36 years, since 81.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm here since 82. We have seen so many things, so many wonderful things, and so many terrible things. But I just think that this is so horrible. Am I exaggerating? I think that this is, I mean, let's say that Netanyahu, let's say that my criticism of Netanyahu is that he doesn't appreciate, from a spiritual point of view, his role, or from a spiritual point of view, he doesn't appreciate the biblical promises to Israel, or Israel's role, or Israel's destiny, or Israel's responsibility to the world as far as our covenant with Hashem. Let's say that that's true, but still, the man is an internationally respected diplomat. The man is a leader. The man has tremendous experience in government, tremendous experience in military, tremendous experience in responsible leading his people. How could he make such a stupid mistake? Unless, of course, like they always say, he knows so much more than we do. He sees so much more. There's so much more involved. So what if we give Jordan everything? So what if they wouldn't exist without us? We give them the technology, agriculture, science, medicine, water. They would completely fall apart without us. And so what? If, of course, the Speaker of the Jordanian Parliament, he praised the murderers of the policemen from the floor of the Jordanian Parliament, even though, I mean, and we're just like, oh, okay, so we'll take away the metal detectors and the cameras and everything because you're upset. We beg you, go back to the Temple Mount because we don't deserve to be there at all. What these statements make to the world, what he's communicating to the world by his total relinquishment of any manifestation of sovereignty, how, I don't know what to say. I'm so totally speechless. But like at the same time I say, I'm not even surprised.
I'm not surprised, and I will also add to that equation, Rabbi, that I believe the Waqf probably isn't surprised, and Jordan's not surprised, and I think that the Waqf probably has a lot more respect and is a lot more fearful of the Jews that go up each day to the Temple Mount and that pray when they can pray, even when they're dragged off. These are the ones that
we have to be careful of. These are the ones
have to be careful of.
These are the ones that are the future. These are the ones they look at us in our eyes with their hatred, snake eyes, and they're thinking to themselves, these are the ones that are going to rebuild the temple.
Right.
And they're right.
And these are the ones that they ultimately respect, and these are the ones whose wishes they ultimately will respect and abide by, because they know they can push Bibi around, and they know they can make a big fuss and puff out their chest and make a lot of noise and you know, make red lights flash all over diplomatic channels around the world. And again, mostly the Western world, because I believe, you know, listening to the Middle East media this past week, Saudi Arabia basically said very quietly, okay, well, we have cameras in Mecca, and that's, who cares? And most of the other, what's left of governments in the Middle East didn't have much to say. Even what's his name, King Abdallah of Jordan, kept quiet. It was his cronies in his parliament who were making big noise. We again scare ourselves. We scare ourselves by saying, oh, if we don't do this, they're going to rise up against us. They didn't rise up against us. You know what? A disgusting, despicable murder took place of 3 people in the family on Friday. A despicable murder of the 2 policemen. I'm not minimizing that, but that's not World War III. That's not Armageddon. I'm sorry. The Muslims got nothing going for them.
But yes, but the fact that they were able to construe our placing metal detectors at the gate to the Temple Mount for the protection of our own citizens, the fact that they were able to construe that as a violation and a desecration of Al-Aqsa is so sick.
It's totally sick.
And the world buys this, and we buy it.
That's the Western world buys it. The Western world loves it. You know, you don't have to tell anybody.
It wasn't a desecration for them to murder on the Temple Mount, for them to keep their weapons on the Temple Mount. That's their vision of peace.
That's
you know what?
Yes.
That is their vision of peace. That's exactly who they are. And we've always said,
because their vision of peace is
surrender to Allah. Whoever controls the Temple Mount controls the heart and soul of this land. It is everything. And so you see what happens when we do not really exercise and show sovereignty over the Temple Mount. Of course, the Temple Mount becomes a place from which flows murder. And you know what? That's not the way it's going to be, because the Temple Mount is going to be the home for the Holy Temple, which is going to be the house of prayer for all people. But first and foremost, Hashem says, because my house shall be called a house of prayer. Hashem says, it's my house. And that's what this season is all about. And you know what? Maybe Bibi disappointed me, but the Jewish people doesn't disappoint me. You can count on them. And look at this past week when it became known that the Waqf wasn't there. So many Jews, for the first time in their lives, streamed to the Temple Mount because they always wanted to go, because it's been in the news so much now. And that's been such an incredible thing during this time, that people are beginning to really come out and declare, this can't go on. The Temple Mount is ours.
The awakening is taking place. People are drawing nearer to the Temple Mount physically and spiritually. And like I said, the old generation is slowly on the way out. And the new generation is slowly taking up this position of influence and power, and this position of influence and power. The whole conversation is changing, the perspectives are changing even as we speak. And like the Rabbi loves to say, the best is yet to be. I'm sure that this is not the end of the story. And we'll be back again next week on the 9th of Av, after having come down, God willing, from the Temple Mount to share once again with you our experiences and our thoughts. Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.